Okay, we're now going to have a look at how we fit one of these little connectors. Now, I've no idea what these are called, but they're like an accent connector because you have this little raised area in the middle that you can add a piece of fabric, or in some instances faux leather, over the top, so you get kind of an accent panel on your connector. Now, I know these are available in the UK. I bought these in the UK. They're also available from global suppliers, from worldwide suppliers, but and I've never actually seen any instructions on how to actually work with them. So I do what I think I need to do, and I'll show you how I've worked with them. There may be other ways. I do know that the ones that you can buy overseas, I believe, have a slightly larger gap around the outside. Now, I've tried putting faux leather on these bits, and unless it's quite thin faux leather, it doesn't work very well. It doesn't sit nicely at the corners. So I generally, if I'm going to do this, do fabric or use a much thinner faux leather, so perhaps a dress weight rather than the sort of heavy marine type faux leather or cork. It's not very forgiving on the corners with faux leather or cork, so you get quite a lot of bulk. So that's what they look like when they come, and this is what they look like once you've taken them to pieces. You have 2 screws in the back, 1, 2, and if you take those screws out, this front block will fall out. And that's not very shiny, and that's fine because that's what we're going to cover with our fabric. So I have a piece of fabric that matches again, I'm using this same piece of fabric. This has been made holes in and had all sorts of bits fitted to it. I'm going to use it again because it's got foam in it, and because this is just a demonstration. I don't want to keep cutting my fabric up so that I can do demos. So what I've done is I've drawn around the central part onto a piece of woven fusible interfacing, and I've cut about 1/8 of an inch on the outside of that square that I've done. You can see that the piece of interfacing is just fractionally bigger on all sides. Now, I'm pretty sure you could do this without interfacing, but if you're using cotton, I just think that it's going to get a bit worn because this sits proud, so a little bit of interfacing will kind of give it a bit of extra oomph. Now, once I've done that, I can cut my piece of fabric down so that it's approximately 1/4 of an inch bigger than the square on each side. It's not a very exact science, is it? I'm going to add just a little bit of Fabri-Tac. You could use a spray adhesive, but I find it's a lot easier with a bit of Fabri-Tac. And you just place that block with the flat side down onto the fabric, and that will just kind of hold it in place, and that's what you need. Now, I have been known to use double-sided tape on these. Didn't really go well for me. So I'm just going to pop a little tiny bit of glue on 2 of the sides, and that will hold my fabric in place. And it is just a tiny amount of glue. Then I'm going to add a little bit on both the other sides. I've got too much there, so I've got a big dollop that's come out, so I'm just going to clear that off with a piece of foam that's just sitting here for the purpose. I'm going to push this side in and this side in, and what you end up with is this sort of bulky corner malarkey. So you have to kind of decide whether you're going to push the corners to the left or the right. And ideally you want to do the same direction with all 4 corners. So I'm going to go I'm going to put those 2 in that way and those 2 in the other way. They are quite fiddly. and you can glue them down if you want to. Any excess fabric that you've got, you can trim away. You shouldn't have too much. You don't want it all to be kind of bulking inside of the... I'm making a pig's ear of this, sorry. That's better. If you need to put a little tiny drop of glue underneath those, I think I may have squeezed my glue bottle. I think that's where my problem lies. So let me just clean the top of my glue bottle and just pop a little tiny... So I'm just gluing down those folded corners just to make sure that they stay put. A couple of them have stuck and a couple of them haven't, so I'm just popping a little bit of extra glue in just to make sure that it stays. And what you need is for it to make a really nice corner on each corner of that central piece. If it's wonky, it will look wonky. So you can see you've got the 2 holes on the back of here, and you need to line those up with the 2 holes on your hardware. Now I like to just use the non-sharp side of my craft knife to push the fabric down into the gap that's sort of round the outside of this. Don't use the sharp side, just use the point. You could use a pin if you wanted to. It just kind of allows you to get right into that little gap, and it is a tiny, tiny little gap. And push your fabric down. Make sure everything's sitting nice and smoothly. And that's looking great from where I am. So I can then replace the screws that came out of the back, and they basically will hold that panel in place. Now if you're using a thinner faux leather, you sometimes don't need to make those little folds in the corners. You can sometimes just mould the faux leather over the top of... There we go, look, looks super, and it matches my fabric, and you can see that that gives a really nice look, and you could add a strap to the top of that. So when they come, the prongs are usually flattened down, and that's just because it's easier to transport them like that. Much less likely that the postman's going to damage himself stabbing himself on those prongs. So you need to bend the prongs up so that they're sitting at 90 degrees to the back of your hardware. And in the same way as we've done with all of the other hardware, you need to kind of audition your washers to make sure that... I think I may have pushed that one in slightly further than I needed to make sure that they fit on perfectly. So I'm going to put that through the first hole. So it goes through the first hole and the 4th hole. So I know that when I make the marks that I'm going to mark on my piece of fabric, that I'm going through the 1st hole and the 4th hole. Now, how far apart do we need them? There's the question. The easiest way to judge is to use your piece of hardware, grab yourself a pen, push the hardware down onto wherever it is that you're going to fit it. And lo and behold, you can use the little dents that appear to mark your fabric. So you kind of know where they're going to go. So I'm going to make sure that I've got these sitting right. I do apologise about the shouting in the background. That's my husband. He's talking to Germany. You wouldn't think he's got a set of earphones on. You'd think he could be heard from my back room. So I'm going to use my washer to make sure that my marks are suitable width for my hardware. Oops. And then, as always, I'm going to use my craft knife. Now, I would always suggest, as usual, popping a piece of Decavil on the back of your fabric, whether that's if you're going through foam as well, I would still put a piece of Decavil on the back of your exterior fabric, and you would be going through your exterior fabric, the Decavil, and any foam you've got. So let's then line up my hardware, pushing the prongs through the holes that I've made, and turn it over. And in the same way as I've done with all of the other hardware, if you want to add a little bit of extra stabilisation, a piece of faux leather, a piece of Decavil, a little piece of Peltex, then please do. Add your washers. And I'm not going to fit it because I don't want to bend the prongs on this, so I can't use it because I've got pairs and it means I'll only have one, which isn't good. But I would push those prongs outwards and then add a piece of duct tape over the top, and lo and behold, let's just take those off. The beautiful piece of hardware is fitted and they look great. I love them. I think they just look splendid. So there we go. Strap connectors with accents. I don't really know what they're called.